Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Comey. Mr. Comey, is personal debt an important consideration when an individual is seeking a security clearance?
Yes.
Why?
Because a person's financial situation could make them vulnerable to coercion by an adversary and allow an adversary to do what we try to do to foreign government officials we find are indebted, and that is recruit them to our side. So it's a serious issue.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So it's a serious issue in any background review.
So someone with substantial personal debt may be vulnerable to influence by a foreign adversary?
Yes. A government official. Yep.
Director Comey, it's been publicly reported that President Trump has a debt of over $421 million, personal debt, most of which has to be repaid in the next few years. My source, New York Times, September 27th. So as a general matter, are there serious risks when someone with hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, personal debt, has access, as the President does, to all of the country's classified and sensitive information?
It's a serious concern when anyone seeking or with a clearance has that kind of financial vulnerability. I don't know the circumstances, particulars of the President's case, but in general, yes.
If the President disclosed his income tax returns, we might be able to know a little more. Let me just say this. This is an important committee with a great history. I've said that before, and I mean it, and I can certainly point to many times in history where the Senate Judiciary Committee was the leading committee, investigative committee, when it came to the United States Senate. I think it is entirely appropriate that we are meeting today to discuss Russian influence on American elections. I can't think of anything more insidious than Vladimir Putin trying to affect the outcome of the American election and overruling the verdict of democracy by the American people. It is a great issue. It's an important issue. There's one problem. Today we're focusing on the wrong election. Today we're focusing on the election of 2016 instead of the election of 2020, the one that is merely 5 weeks away. FBI Director Wray testified earlier this month that Russia is, quote, very active in the 2020 election. Director Wray said Russia is exerting, quote, malign foreign influence in an effort to hurt the Biden campaign. Direct quote. That would seem to be something that the Senate Judiciary Committee might be interested in. Not only that there's a possibility of interference with the American people voting for President of the United States, but that interference comes from a foreign source, Russia, and they really have their favorite in the race, and their favorite appears to be the incumbent president. And yet we are not taking a look at that today. We are going back on a trip down memory lane to 4 years ago to decide whether or not certain documents were handled properly, and I will concede the fact some were not. But let's be honest. If we were doing our job, we'd be talking about the 2020 election, whether American law is adequate to discourage the Russian intervention, and what steps we are taking as a nation to protect the integrity of the election process. We are not doing that because the agenda here is all about a dossier written 5 or 6 years ago. Well, that may be of interest to some, but not to most of the American people. And I think it really comes down to some fundamental questions. Why, if we are embarking on this escapade into 2016 and what preceded the Russian interference in that election of 2016, why did we decide as a committee on a partisan basis to reject my effort to include subpoenas of Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort and so a Russian agent Konstantin Kilimnik? If we wanted to know everything about 2016, why wouldn't we subpoena them? But yet, on a partisan roll call, this committee decided not to. Not interested. Don't want to get into probing it. We have lots of questions today of Director Comey as to whether he read every document, when he read it if he did, what impact it had on him. But when it came to these two key witnesses whose names appear over and over and over again in the Russian interference of the 2016 election, this committee, on a partisan roll call, rejected my effort to extend subpoenas to these two individuals. Is there some information we don't want to know from those two people? I think there's a lot of questions that have gone unanswered. I also want to make it clear this notion about the Steele dossier. Let me ask you this, Director Comey. Was the Steele dossier the reason that the FBI began looking into Russian interference in the 2016 election?
No.
Are you aware, Director Comey, that none, not one, of the 37 indictments and 199 criminal counts resulting from the Mueller investigation relied on the Steele dossier?
I have read that.
I think that makes the case that all of this attention on the Steele dossier, as fascinating as that document may be, did not have direct relevance on the conclusion that the Russians were interfering in the 2016 election or the indictments that followed from the Mueller investigation.
If I may, thank you. I'm sorry.
My time up?
No.
Oh, thank you. Let me ask, if I might, on a statement made by the Attorney General. Let's see if I can find this to be sure I got this accurately. On May 18th, Attorney General Barr gave a quote at the Department of Justice press conference. He said, "What happened to the president in the 2016 election and throughout the first 2 years of his administration was abhorrent. It was a grave injustice. It was unprecedented in American history." The Attorney General went on to say, "The law enforcement and intelligence apparatus of this country were involved in advancing a, quote, false and utterly baseless Russian collusion narrative against the president," end of quote. Then he went on to say, "The proper investigative and prosecutive standards of the Department of Justice were abused, in my view, in order to reach a particular result." Director Comey, would you comment on that statement made by Attorney General Barr about the men and women in the Justice Department?
He says that a lot. I have no idea what on earth he's talking about. This was an investigation that was appropriately predicated and opened, that had to be opened, and that was in the main conducted in the right way, picked up by the special counsel, led to the indictment of dozens of people, and a finding by your colleagues in the Senate that the head of Trump's campaign was a grave counterintelligence threat to the United States of America because he was funneling information to a known Russian intelligence officer. The notion that the Attorney General believes that was an illegitimate endeavor to investigate that mystifies me.
Thank you, Director Comey.